Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It is Monday, August 8th, 2022, 7:06 p.m. And tonight we are having committees. Our first to lead off will be the Committee of the Whole with 2 agenda items. The first of those is the Community Improvement Corporation. I'll give it a little bit of background information, and then I think the Mayor and Service Safety Director Stone will likely have some additional comments to make before we entertain questions. The Community Improvement Corporation, council members have been provided with a PowerPoint that gives some basic background information and also a sample ordinance and a draft exhibit of the CIC agreement. To briefly just give a summary, this is the kind of corporation that was authorized by the state in 1961 through the Ohio Department of Development. And it allows for the establishment of a nonprofit corporation for advancing, encouraging, and promoting the industrial, economic, commercial, and civic development of a community or area. And among the other details with these documents that we'll be looking at and examining and placing under consideration, we also would have a filing to make with the, if it's approved, with the Secretary of State, and to designate the statutory agent. We adopt a code of regulations, and then if approved, then we would begin an annual reporting period along with the other functionings of the organization. The guidelines state that if Community Improvement Corporation is designated for a municipality, at least 40% of the board must be elected or appointed officials of the political subdivision. And so that's something that the mayor and the law director have been examining and looking at for that. And what this, as I understand it, is that this Community Improvement Corporation would allow us to borrow money if we wanted to have loans, to buy, lease, sell, or real or personal property. We could enter into contracts. So this gives the municipality a little bit more flexibility as we look at some economic development activities. And I think the mayor is specifically thinking of this in terms of the Armory. So if you have additional information, which I'm sure you do, then
I do.
Sure. Thank you.
To begin with, some years ago, I believe it was in the 80s, around that time frame anyway, there was a county CIC, or Community Improvement Corporation. But it was noticed that, you know, in the mid-2000s, it really wasn't being used because the county had stood up the Port Authority, and the Port Authority was basically managing that on the county level. The city was involved in the CIC, the original CIC, and when I became mayor, it was in that time frame to where through the Athens County Economic Development Council, it was just kind of being drawn down and putting it to bed. And at that point in time, I didn't completely understand what the powers are that are associated with a CIC. Today, though, to stand a CIC back up again, it would be the City of Athens Community Improvement District, the Community Improvement Corporation. CIC can be a community, it can be a township, it can be a county, it can be multiple counties, you know, to have something like this. I see a lot of utility in bringing the CIC back again for the City of Athens. I shared with council some time ago a document that speaks to the CIC that I pretty much pulled down off the state auditor's office. And hopefully council's had a chance to review it and look at all the nuances. These are nothing new. These started in the mid-60s, 1960s, to where within the ORC, CICs were established, and basically they were established for economic development, using it as a mechanism by which it gives the local jurisdiction, or county, or municipality, whatever, the ability to apply for grants that a county, city, or township government cannot apply for. It gives them the ability to acquire property. It gives them the ability to repurpose or divest themselves of properties, which is an interesting mechanism unto itself. This is all, again, just to give you something you can look at your leisure if you're having trouble sleeping. It's under ORC 1702 and 1724. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds because you've got all the reading information already provided to you, but it is a designated agency for county, township, municipality. There has to be at least 40% who are elected or designated to the CIC board, a minimum of 5, maximum of 7. President Nisley and I have been thinking this through with the law director, and we feel that to reconstitute this, and I looked at the original documents and who served on the early CICs, which had county commissioners and the mayor and some other individuals that are associated. Since we're going to do municipality, is that it would be the mayor, the service safety director, the president of city council, a city council member, and then it would have the auditor who is serving on the CIC board. And then I would like to add 2 more individuals to bring us to 7, to where they are individuals in the business sector, business leaders. I'm not going to name them at this point in time, but we're looking at one who is specific to where it is a business owner for a minority or female-owned business here in the city of Athens to also sit on the CIC's board. As President Nisley mentioned, one of the things is, to use it for property. The Armory is something that we would like to have fall under the CIC. It gives us the ability to have an entity that is not the city managing the Armory and the operations. We retain it as our building, but it's under the CIC, and let them run operations in there, let them identify who members of what the membership would look like for anyone who wants to work remotely in the Armory. If there's an anchor tenant, such as the Athens County Foundation, it allows this managing body to identify, to work through those details of having that person become a tenant within the building. But it also goes far beyond that. As you're well aware, hopefully you are, some of you may not be, we own the property at 83 Columbus Road. We've had multiple plans for what that could be. It was a former gas station back in the day. The city was deeded that property. I can't remember the gas station, Bilo or Marathon, but whatever it was, it's irrelevant. We had plans to turn it into a park and ride facility because it was not that far from the Columbus Road bike path spur, but it doesn't align itself well with the bike path spur. The CIC could certainly be helpful in disposing of that property. The city would then have the CIC manage the property and divest ourselves of that property. We've got other properties that the city owns that we are finding are no longer needed for the public good. We have a field that we're using out on US 50 that we use to spread our sludge on for fertilizing the property, and it was managed by or farmed by a farmer. But we've gotten to the point where we can no longer field apply out there, and so again, another opportunity with the CIC is to be able to dispose of our 80 acres or portions thereof to no longer be in possession of those. The other thing with releasing these properties, it puts them back on the tax rolls, the property tax rolls. Because currently, all city properties and all university properties, that's a whole different story, but all city properties are tax exempt, property tax exempt. So to use these as use the CIC as an economic development tool, it allows us to get that into the hands of a developer or a business of some type to use that property and therefore start to receive property tax on that, and hopefully it's a business that is hiring multiple employees, which for us is going to, certainly the Canaanville property will not do that, but properties in the city that we could divest ourselves of because we find ourselves no longer in need of that property with no, imminent plan for that property that we could, the CIC can vet who would be basically the best business to go in and repurpose that property and get it to where it is a revenue generating parcel once again. I'm going to let Director Stone speak a little bit more, to get into a little bit more detail about the Armory and the Armory plant.
Right, thank you, sir. So in the Army, we do rifle marksmanship, and you have a qualification tables, and you have like the 300-meter target, the 250-meter target, the 200-meter target, and then there's the 50-meter target. And so the 50-meter target is a term that we use often when we talk about the most urgent problem. So the 50-meter target for the Armory is the potential to apply for historic preservation tax credits. And so our strategy right now to get us across the finish line with our capital stack that we're building for this $3.5 million Armory renovation project is to get access to the Ohio Builds money, which many of you have heard that Governor DeWine made the announcement about this money that's going to go to Appalachia, and there's an early implementation round, and we think that we will be fairly competitive with the Armory project going after this Ohio Builds money. But because I believe in redundancy, we have a parallel path to come up with a plan B if that Ohio Builds allocation doesn't come in time or falls through or we're not competitive or what have you. And that approach is historic preservation tax credits. So as the mayor mentioned, cities don't pay property taxes, they don't pay income taxes as entities, but there is a significant amount of money out there at both the federal and state level to utilize tax credits, state tax credits and federal tax credits for renovation of historic buildings. Cities are not eligible to apply for historic preservation tax credits because they don't have a tax liability. However, community improvement corporations are eligible to apply. Now, community improvement corporations don't have a tax liability either, but they can at least apply and then strike a partnership with an entity that has a tax liability such that those historic preservation tax credits can be realized. So the next round to apply for historic preservation tax credits at the state level, and then ultimately you apply at the federal level at the same time, begins in January. And so my goal would be, if we fail at the Ohio Builds ask, which is my preference because Ohio historic preservation tax credits rather are complicated, would be to try to have everything in place and then ask you to place the Armory into the CIC so that we can make that initial application in January. Again, not the plan A, but that's the approach that we'd like to take.
Okay, and I think the CIC, I hear what you're saying, is that that's there as kind of a backup plan, but that's also, I think it's a good possible measure for us long-term. Because it'll offer lots of possibilities.
This is not,
yeah.
I'm sorry, President Isley, this is not purely for the Armory.
Yeah.
This is a great benefit for the city in the long term as a flexible tool to do economic development. That said, the urgency, at least in my perspective, is related to that particular project and trying to, as we're pulling all the capital stack together and to strike while the iron's hot on getting that project across the finish line. So that's my plan B if the Ohio Builds money doesn't come.
Right, and one example, and you're right, the mayor mentioned the gas station and the other field
absolutely.
too as possibilities. I'll open it up for questions or comments. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'm curious about the relationship between Blue Dot Co-working and the CIC for the Armory. Let's talk about the Armory. Blue Dot Co-working is going to create a remote space business basically within the Armory. The CIC, they would report to the CIC Board of Directors, is that?
They would lease from the CIC. So as it stands now, as a city, if we would like to lease the Armory, we could lease it to Blue Dot Co-working if we advertise in the newspaper for 5 weeks and take the highest and best bid for leases and hope, keep our fingers crossed, that Blue Dot provides the highest and best bid. But understanding that that is a risk that we run into as a city, because cities are constrained under those rules associated with leasing property. You don't just get to pick. I can't just say, hey, Councilmember McCary, I'm going to lease this property to you. You have to do a public process for that. Whereas the CIC has extra flexibility. So the CIC would be the entity that then subsequently would take the Armory, strike the lease arrangement with Blue Dot Co-working, who would then operate the facility. Did I answer your question, sir?
It does. Let me just go back to one of the slides that I believe the mayor provided. If the CIC is a designated agency for a county, township, or municipality, then at least 40% must be elected or appointed officials. Could it be 100%?
It could be.
So then I wonder how that gets in, if you've got the municipality really deciding on behalf of the CIC. It's an interesting relationship, and if the state has figured it out where this all works, I'm all for it, but it's interesting that you really could be the municipality in the name of the CIC, choosing Blue Dot Co-working, for example, if you want.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple things, and as I indicated, there's at least two of the branches of government who would be on the CIC board for checks and balances, to include the auditor, and then it would be, as I had mentioned, two individuals who are business leaders here in the city of Athens who have nothing to do with the electorate, or well, they're electorate, but they don't have anything to do with the decision-making on a daily basis within the city of Athens, but advising as well. So,
Right, I support that construction of the
Yeah.
board. I just didn't know how you could do it if you wanted to.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Well, when I got this over the weekend, I read through it, and it was nice that, one, it was in layperson's terms and was very easy to understand and made a lot of sense, and I thought it was a very good document and a very good plan. Lord knows we need to diversify our economy here in Athens. Right now, we basically rely on the 3 Bs: beverages, books, and beds, whether that be rental property or the beds in the hospital. We have to diversify that. But in looking at this, 51.01.02 is proposed, the board, the makeup of the board, I would offer an additional possibility. And this is based on some experience working with the Athens City Schools. I was not an appointed member, but I was 100% attendee for the Athens City Schools Business Advisory Committee for a period of about 2.5 years. And we met every month. We met every month. There were five appointed members by the Board of Education, and Dr. Gibbs made it such that anyone could actually sit and participate at the table. Couldn't vote, but participate. And one of the things I think we found is that we needed to have a greater diversity of business people at the table. And in looking at this, I was thinking perhaps 9 might be a better number. Now, I checked, and there really are no limits. In fact, it said that in one of the documents it could be as many people as you wanted. And in my mind, those 9 people would be most of the people you've listed so far. Obviously, number 1, the mayor, the president of Athens City Council, the auditor. In addition, the mayor's appointee from the city administration, and a member of the city council. So that would be 5. The other 4 would be business leaders in the community. And one of the things that we found in the Athens City Schools Business Advisory Committee is that we have many industry categories in town. And when looking at this, the 4 that I would throw out as a possibility would be these, in no particular order: hospitality in the service industry, manufacturing, healthcare, and retail. And of course, within any of those 4, could certainly do as the mayor mentioned, and I think that's a great idea, minority or female-owned business, however we want to structure that. But by getting 4 different areas, I think we get a greater cross-section than we would with just 2 people from the business community. We haven't gone to first reading yet, so something I just throw out for your consideration as you develop this and bring this to council for first reading.
Mayor Patterson.
I certainly appreciate that. The other thing you really have to consider when you start getting larger like that is being able to draw a quorum.
Right.
It's my experience on serving on the Athens County Economic Development Board that becomes a challenge, and that's a board of 7 individuals. So I hear what you're saying. I mean, we can certainly change the structure as we move forward. If we find that, yes, we probably should have 2 additional individuals to keep it at an odd number, we can explore that. So this is a document in flux that we can change over time, as we get our feet under us and figure out how we're going to be able to use a tool such as this, which, again, I find vitally important to the city at this point in time. I don't disagree with your comment about economic development and how we have hitched our wagon to one entity in particular for 220 years. And as we're looking to expand, we do need to continually look at our economic development portfolio so that we are better diversified when it comes to ED.
Service Director Stone.
And to caveat on what the mayor said, is there may be an opportunity to establish in the establishing legislation both a minimum and maximum number of participants, so that if there were vacancies, that you could still have a quorum based upon a lesser number being appointed at the time. So that, like, for instance, if there was a situation where the council member was vacant, or one of the personnel, or two of the personnel that were business community members were vacant while we're in between people, that it could still function with a lesser number, and that quorum would be lesser based on their time. So I think there's some potential to do that and not run into the problem.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Councilmember Swank?
Real simple question, funding, where does it come from?
The funding can come from a number of places. There's one of the slides that you've got in your deck, speaks to funding. It can be grants that the city might not be eligible for. It could come from general fund. It could also come from the sales of properties that make the CDC, give the CDC the power to where if the board feels, hey, there's a parcel of land over here that might be nice for the CIC to own, they could purchase with the mindset that could be developed, or maybe there's a developer interested in some set part of the city. In particular, I'm constantly frustrated yet optimistic that the opportunity zone that we have in the city, and we have two, one of them is basically the entire length of, well, I shouldn't say the entire length, it's a good chunk of East State Street, and then the other is the Stimson Avenue corridor to include a lot of the properties that are on the South Green, believe it or not, because they're within that census tract that has been designated as an opportunity zone. Stimson has been one of those portions of the opportunity zone that a CIC might be really helpful with being able to advance some properties that could be redeveloped, or new property, existing properties to where it is completely redeveloped, to where there's new structures going up, old ones going away and new ones coming up in their place. So the CIC gives a lot of leeway in being able to do that, and again, with the funding that they can generate, which is an interesting mechanism unto itself. Not unlike the land bank, where the land bank's revenue we've seen since its existence has really increased their revenue through funding that exists at the state or federal level, but also with the transfer of properties that were dilapidated and then put back out on the market again and resold and repurposed.
Any other comments or questions from council members? Councilmember Reisner.
It just occurred to me, will members of the board of the CIC be compensated anyway?
They will not.
So it's strictly volunteer?
Well, for elected, it's my job.
Well, you think about it, this is a not-for-profit corporation. I mean, it is separate from the city. It's separate from being mayor. You're now on a board running an organization. And so it's not unheard of for members of a board who work for not-for-profits to be compensated in some way. So
That will not be the case at the CIC.
okay. My other question is, it seems that the way that things are right now, and probably because there's not a whole lot to do, the board is essentially doing all the work, applying for the grants, making the phone calls, knocking on the doors, trying to find tenants and opportunities and so on. Do you ever foresee a point where that would become unworkable, where you would actually have to have a staff out there doing the phone calls, knocking on the doors, writing the letters, applying for the grants, who would need to be compensated?
I could see that, in time, if this is successful and we find it growing to where we need a grants administrator functionally that is managing everything through the, being received through the CIC or property management. We can certainly explore that. I'd have to dig back into the ORC and see if revenue generated can be used partially to fund individuals to
Yeah.
work for the CIC. I'll probably also, Councilmember Eisner, look at other municipalities in the state of Ohio to see that have a CIC. There's 300 of these, by the way,
Oh,
in
okay,
the state.
yeah.
To see if there's other municipalities or counties that have stood these up and that they have paid staff that are doing the day-to-day operations. I'll probably target the more successful ones.
Yeah. Well, if that does occur, wouldn't that be a metric to measure success? I mean, obviously, if you're getting to the point where you need more people to help and they have to be paid, that would indicate to me that you're doing something right. So, yeah, hopefully it'll work out.
All right. Thank you for the comments and questions. And I think what we'll do is now is move on to the liquor permits. There were a number of questions as one Trex permit for Ohio University Athena Cinema came to us last week, and then another came to us for 74 North Court Street that was a transfer of a permit from within the city. And we thought it would be just an opportune moment to review some of the regulations as we understand and know them, and to see if there are any other questions that we could answer. And if not, we also have the resource of being able to call the Department of Development, the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, to ask them further. When we get these licenses, we have a certain number of days to respond if we have concerns or we want to object to the permits. We have done that in the past. The most recent in the near past was actually back probably in 2015 when we had the Chipotle liquor control application. And our argument was made that the area in the uptown was already saturated and it was within close proximity to a school. And it was a good meeting, and we learned some things from the Division of Liquor Control about how they deny a permit or reject a permit for review. And because you might read in the Columbus Dispatch, oh, they're talking about taking liquor permits away. Well, those tend to be, number one, it's a larger city. Number two, it's also a situation where they might have been able to see that there was a fight that occurred in the actual place, or other difficulties that have happened, and those are sometimes the reasons for review or withdrawal of liquor permits. In this case, the applications, I know the other thing that's sometimes a concern is how many we have, what our quota is. And so I did learn a little bit today in talking with the Division of Liquor Control that they look, if at the top of the permits, the one I printed out for council members shows the population right now that they're basing this on is 23,849. So there are 24 total, there are 24 permits in the C1 and C2, and then the other ones drop down to 12 apiece. And it's always kind of puzzled me, is like, well, why are we 1 over or 2 over or 3 over? And if you go back historically I went back to some of the printouts that I had and discussed it with the liquor control staff person today. And she says, well, the population fluctuates, number one. So there were times when the population on which they based our number of permits was 26,000. And so we had 26 liquor permits for the C1 and C2, and then 13 for the others. The other thing that does add into this over a period of time are the Trexes, because then they are folded within that quota. And so as we add those in, and we have added in over the past probably 10 years, we have added 5 or 6 Trex permits. Those have all become part of these quotas in these different aggregate levels. So I wanted to take a moment to see if there were other questions. I know that Councilmember Swank had a few questions about Ohio University and the Athena Cinema and perhaps what some of their plans were. I did not get a copy of that full application. I will have to admit I did not get that yet today in my conversation with them. But I thought I'd just open it up for discussion or questions or additional comments and information that the mayor might have. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
So if I understand it right, one of the basis of a Trex transfer And really, it's a sale. There's no such thing as a transfer. These permits get sold and they're six-figure contracts and getting higher every day, is to encourage, lead to, provide for, facilitate, whatever word you want to use, economic development, such as a new restaurant coming to town and all of that. The first question I had in regards to the one for the Athena is, do we have any idea who Tranquil Lady is? In other words, the people behind the business.
No, is the answer.
Okay.
Simple answer. And, liquor control has to say who the previous permit holder was.
Right.
And in Whitehall, that's who that particular, owner was of that. And I don't believe they will give you the history either if that liquor permit had been removed from that, some bar or something, as Councilmember or President Nisley was indicating, probably the leading cause of having a liquor permit removed is it has been a repeat offender of either dangerous activities or allowing for underage drinkers, or a number of infractions can lead to them losing their permit. So, not knowing who they are, but they're part of the pool. So
Right.
you're gonna get the name of whoever the owner of that permit was in that pool. And so there's no relation, well, I spoke to Matthew Shaftel, Dean Shaftel, earlier today for the Dean of Fine Arts, and he indicated that we don't know who this person is, that there's no relationship there. Not to get ahead of you, but you did have another question that was about, whether is alcohol going to be served during G and PG movies? And what I can tell you, because, I asked Matthew, are you going to start serving beer when you're playing 101 Dalmatians during the afternoon matinee? And he said, absolutely not. Although, to your question, if you look at the ratings of the movies, if they're rated, that come through the Athens International Film and Video Festival, a lot of them are PG movies. There's also, Evening at the Met that is shown at the Athena. And so what Matthew indicated to me is that, we've got a lot of citizens who would love to have a glass of wine while they're listening to music at the Met, or watching something at the Athens Arts and Music Festival. But he also indicated to me that if you would like to speak to him directly, that I could share his cell phone number with you if you want to talk to him.
Well, he's my neighbor, so I just walk over.
Walk over and ask him.
So another quick question, and I appreciate that answer. That clarifies a lot of things. Another question is, and I think you may have said this, but I think I've missed it too. Would this be for on-premise consumption only or for carry-out?
On-premise consumption only. I did tell Dean Shaftel that the Athena is within the Dora footprint, and if he so chose to do that, and he said, Mayor, one step at a time. So there is no intent. I mean, I don't believe they can operate as a carryout.
That's what I was getting at.
What he, again, in my conversation today, informed me is that at the concession stand within the Athena, there will be a section in which they will be pouring beer or wine. President Nisley, I'm not sure if it's a D1, D2, and a D3.
It's all
So
three,
it's
and
fair to
the D1 would allow for a carryout as would the D2, but, maybe I could see maybe something happens and they've been to a movie and they still have their glass of wine and the door is operating. And that means they could walk out with it.
By carry out, I mean not buy it there and carry it out, but as you would a beverage store, a drive-through drive, and that concerns me a little bit on several levels.
That would be serious.
Because if it's a place that you can walk into, buy a bottle of wine, buy a six-pack of beer or a case of Natural Light, and take it with you, that concerns me a bit for several reasons. Number one, some of the things you mentioned before, where it is in relation to a school and to a church. Secondly, and we've talked about this for 40 years, the university competing with private businesses and having an unfair advantage because they own the property, they're not paying a lease, so on and so forth. So I have absolutely no problem whatsoever, and I would be one of those people watching something, I'd like to sit down and watch Gone with the Wind, all 4 hours of it, and have a nice cold beer, or a glass of wine, or a mint julep, or whatever the case might be. But the thought of not only that being a movie theater, but people walking in and out, buying cases of beer, troubles me a bit. And the way this, I think, President Isley read this, that you could do that.
Well, I'm just sharing with you what the dean had indicated to me, and that is not their intent, to where they're gonna become a carry-out type of establishment.
But this would allow them.
It's just for the
Yeah,
patrons who are
this would
coming.
give them the permission to do it, though, if they change their tune down the road. And for that reason, I would be very much in favor of getting a little more information. If that necessitates a hearing, having a hearing. Again, I don't oppose this by any means, but if that is a component part of it, I have some concerns. And Terry and I are members of the Athena. We join every year, and it's our theater, as it is everybody else's up here. I go back to when it was one theater, and it's a valuable asset in our community. But I would have a little concern, and I've talked with others over the weekend about this, of it not turning into, but also being a carry-out.
Again, if I may, I think the best thing to do would to speak directly to Dean Shaptel about that. I've sat through a liquor permit hearing review case right here in council chambers. They're extremely expensive because you've got the Chipotle had to bring their liquor control lawyer who had to sit here. We ended up losing that case for trying to deny a liquor permit at Chipotle when they wanted to have, daiquiris and margaritas and whatever being sold there. And I remember vividly their lawyer, sitting there saying, this is costing my client a whole lot of money, and ORC, liquor control, is going to end up, they're looking to generate revenue. They're going to, your likelihood of if there wasn't anything egregious that has taken place within that establishment, your chances for having it go through, winning that case, are extremely slim. But what you're saying is, this is, so to have the hearing through the Department of Commerce, liquor control, again, the easiest path is to reach directly out to the dean for the College of Fine Arts and say, are you ever going to be selling beer and wine out the door for people who come in and come out, and maybe get an MOU?
That's what I was going to ask. Would that be appropriate?
It would be. I mean, anything could be asked.
Okay.
I don't know that Keaton Stadium allows for people walking out there with 6-packs under their arm and they sell alcohol, or convo, you can't do it.
Right, but they have the liquor permit there.
They do have a liquor
The
permit.
university has the liquor permit there, and I would concur with the mayor that I think an informal kind of conversation with the dean, I mean, it's no guarantee that the dean's going to be there 35 years from now, and that something could shift.
Or 5
But I
years
think,
from now,
or 5. But I think if we have, a conversation, that would be far more productive than trying to do the hearing.
That's fair.
Based on our experience. Councilmember Reisner.
I'm trying to remember, my brain doesn't work as well as it used to, but didn't we have a sort of a similar situation, discussion, argument when Fluff Bakery wanted to start selling alcohol along with their bagels?
We did.
And where did that end up?
I don't remember.
Well, it ended up
I think they were given a track.
They were given a
They were
Trex.
given a
Exactly.
Trex, yeah.
That's my point.
Yep.
I mean,
So this is a Trex. I
Yeah.
hear your, yeah.
Soul on East State Street was also given a Trex, because at the time, they only had a
Right,
D2
right.
permit, and they said, people don't come in here wanting to get a wine to go with their Caribbean dinner.
So,
They want Corona.
so I wonder if there are any other questions related to the Athena? I know there was also, yes, Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, President. I just had one brief thing just to address one of Member Smike's questions through a quick rabbit hole dive into Google. Sitting up here, Tranquil Lady is a failed restaurant in Whitehall, Ohio.
Okay.
So I assume it's someone who's trying to make some money back and sell off their liquor permit.
Thanks for checking. Okay.
Nailed it.
Okay, and are there any other questions or comments about this agenda item? Okay. If not, thank you for the discussion. Thanks for the questions. I'm always learning something. I learned something today about quotas, so I appreciate that. All right, our next committee is Transportation, and that is Councilmember Reisner as chair, Councilmembers Grace, Ziff, and Swank, and then joining us on the dais tonight will be Councilmember Spielness, because she has the update for us on the Ad hoc Committee on Pedestrian Accessibility.
Thank you, President Isley.
Can I make a suggestion before you get started? Why don't you go up in front of the dais there?
Want me to do that?
It's real hard to hear you. I noticed when I've been sitting over there that in the mayor's seat, I cannot hear you.
It's better when you're out there.
It's better when you're out there, so
Yeah.
that would be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Camera angle's a good one, too.
Now you make her paranoid.
Oh, great. Okay, so,
Could you give us your name and your,
okay, let me start with that. Yes, I'm Solveig Spielness, and I'm not on this committee, but on the Transportation Committee, but because I'm on the Ad hoc Pedestrian Accessibility Committee, I've been asked to give an update of what we did the second quarter. So here we go. We've actually done a lot. Did I hit something? We've actually done a lot. So, and I just want to review who's on the committee real quick before I start. Diane Bouvier is the chair and the Disability Commission representative. Rob Delac, this is in alphabetical order, by the way. Rob Delac is our community representative. Steve Patterson, our mayor, is also on the committee. Neil Ryan is the student representative, me, and then Stephanie Hunter, who is a community member, contributor, and doing a lot for us, actually. She's a sidewalk expert. So just to review, I'll try to do this quickly. We came up with what we call the space framework. It's something that our committee, actually, with a lot of discussion, came up with based on a lot of other research from other communities. And it refers to safety, proximity, accessibility, connection, and ease. That provides us with an overview of all the issues that we think are important in terms of pedestrian accessibility and helped us to come up with questions for the survey. Okay, so the committee met with David Riggs, Director of Code Enforcement, as you know, about enforcement processes related to sidewalk improvements. You know, things like snow and all those things that you're familiar with. We requested and received legal information from Law Director Eliason, who provided us with a number of preliminary answers to issues that we were concerned with, and we're going to pursue more along those lines. We requested and received information regarding the data. So we developed a data gathering plan, and we developed a strategy for gathering representative sample information from the community to get input, because we wanted to make this as comprehensive as possible. So we have targeted focus groups, we had the survey, we are talking to members of the administration and looking at research from around the country in Ohio to see what seems to be best practices. We developed a communication plan to let people know what we were doing, to encourage input with the local TV sources, social media, direct email to local organizations. We distributed, if you haven't seen it already, which I think all of you have, the QR code on the city utility bills, pop-up events at the Donkey, thank you very much, for the Donkey, and other places to discuss the project. We developed a flyer to solicit support from the Athens City Commission on Disabilities, because they had events, so we wanted to, of course, include them in the process. Community survey, as I mentioned, we developed and piloted and launched the community survey, and that's been open from July 1st, and we're going to extend it to August 31st. We don't have that many students yet, so we're trying to target students right now, but we've done a pretty good job of getting. And right now, just so if you're curious, as of August 4th, we had 575 responses, which quite frankly is pretty darn good. So we're pretty happy about that. Just a quick overview of what we're looking at. There's an overwhelming interest, not surprisingly, in remediating sidewalk conditions in Athens, and we're tracking and putting on GIS with our experts in that area. Comments about specific sidewalk issues. I think you'll be real excited when you see that. And And again, we're going to be conducting focus groups with people with disabilities, but we've already done disabilities and seniors. We're targeting other groups as well to specifically ask them what their issues are. So the next quarter, we're going to analyze the quantitative and qualitative survey data, do some more focus groups as I have mentioned, and then we're going to focus on budget and legal issues related to pedestrian accessibility. So our next update will be October 24th. And by then we should be pretty close to having another draft of our reports to discuss. So, any questions?
Questions from the committee? Oh, come on. Must be something.
Well, I'm sure that many of you took the survey. I know I did, of course.
I did.
And I got some very nice comments from people who have been around the community a lot and thought it was pretty well done, and I was pretty impressed. Anyway.
As part of your data gathering, what kind of data are you, let's see how to phrase it, what types of data are you collecting? Is it text data, someone writes about something, or the survey, photographs, or everything?
Well, I mean, we're not using Facebook stuff, really, if that's what you're asking.
No, I'm asking like citizen comes along, sees a problem with a sidewalk at a certain location, they get out their iPhone, they go click, click, and they have a nice picture, they've documented it, and now what do I do with it? Who do I tell?
All of that is on the GIS mapping. You will be very impressed with the extent of information we have on there. So we will be able to prioritize, per the request from administration, prioritize which are the worst places, and we'll be able to talk about funding issues, options, and we also, quite frankly, want to encourage a more pedestrian-friendly community, which we are, pretty much. But perhaps we can expand on that, and that's sort of a principle that we feel pretty strongly about.
Sorry, Member Crow, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So I don't know, Member Spionis, if you have an answer to this question, but it just came up to me recently, and I thought I'd ask you as now a sidewalk expert. I was contacted by a citizen in my ward who noticed that there would be some construction or some repair work of the storm sewer in the street, and they wanted me to look at their property because they think there might be a connection to the sidewalk in front of their home. And at first I thought of the street, and I thought, I don't think there are sidewalks on that street. But sure enough, I went, and there's a stretch of about 30 feet of sidewalk. Just in front of this home, and a little bit, it looked like the next home, with no other continuous sidewalk. So does that mean that homeowner just decided at some point, I'm going to put in a sidewalk in front of my home, even though you can't go anywhere in either direction?
Well, actually, we actually had that situation on the west side where, I won't tell you the street because I don't want to reveal the person's name, and they came to me and said, well, it's a long story, but they ended up getting rid of the sidewalk because they did not want to maintain it, and there was no purpose because it didn't connect anywhere. And there were some other flooding issues. Anyways, long story. And the city's been very good about taking care of that. But I'm sure, because he didn't put in the sidewalk, it was there when he bought the house. So it could have been there a long time, and maybe at some point somebody said, you've got to put in your sidewalk. And then nobody else did. So, yeah.
That's a start.
Yeah. Yes.
I got a call from a resident in Sam's ward too about their sidewalk. And the big issue is it's going to need to be replaced. When in your reporting or wherever do you think we're going to hear specifically about possible funding mechanisms? Is that the October report, or is that on down the road?
I think that that's going to be pretty much at the end of this process because that's complicated. And how shall I put this? Complicated and potentially contentious. So I think that we will do a lot of analysis and really look at it hard before we make any recommendations. And, Law Director Eliason is going to be part of talking about that too. I mean, there are different models in other cities but what we can do, given the kind of city we are in Ohio, I'm not ready to talk about that yet.
Okay. To be determined.
To be determined, exactly.
Thank you.
Other questions for anyone? Administration, you want to jump in on this? Okay.
No? Okay,
I think it's been wonderful.
okay. Nothing you want to add?
Process.
I'm surprised that Rob Delac wasn't here. You know, he usually comes. I figured since we're talking about sidewalk, he'd want to add something.
He's out of state,
Oh, is he?
yes.
Okay. Well, then, that's a good reason. Okay. All right,
Thank you very
well,
much.
If that's it, then thank you very much.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
just
you.
plow
Thank you.
ahead and, you know, if you have specific concerns, let us know. But,
Thanks.
you know, we'll keep you informed as stuff happens. Thank
Okay.
you. But I just want to emphasize, this is a really good group. They are really working hard on this. And we have some serious talent on this group. I'm thoroughly impressed.
All right.
Well, that concludes transportation.
Thank you, Councilmember Reisner. We'll move on to City and Safety Services Committee, chaired by Councilmember McCary, joined by Councilmembers Grace, Swank, and Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. We'll go ahead and begin our meeting with just 3 items on the agenda for today. A couple of them related to sewers, and the first one specifically up at Dairy Lane regarding our sewer expansion efforts, taking on some of the county's waste. And we do have our City Safety Services Director here to provide additional information this evening and to answer any questions about this particular project. Can we start with that one?
Sure, thank you, Member McCary. So we were going to bring this to this body last week to get moving on at least one of the pieces of legislation, and through consultations, we made the determination that it would have been a little bit too complicated to try to get all that ready for last week and move forward. The law director asked me to delay and then have a discussion tonight, but with the request that you consider suspension next week on at least one of the pieces of legislation necessary. So for this project, because it is funded primarily through a Ohio EPA Water Pollution Control Loan Fund, and specifically a particular type of loan that's used for sewer regionalization, which is a long-term zero-interest funding mechanism that is something we're attempting to put a lot of things in since we're doing this work in conjunction with receipt of the county sewage, not only for county sewage, we're doing it for other purposes as well, but we're trying to put as many things into that bucket as we can because of the zero-interest long-term loan situation. So there are 5 pieces of legislation that ultimately will be necessary for this particular project. One of them you've already passed, and again, this is unlike a lot of other construction projects we do because of the EPA, the Ohio EPA's process. The legislation you already passed was authorizing the administration to advertise and accept bids, and that was completed with Ordinance 7222. So as soon as we are ready, we are going to put those bids on the street. After we receive bids, the EPA requires, which is unique to this particular type of funding mechanism, a resolution of tentative award. It's a one-reading resolution. We don't do it for anything else other than this particular type of funding stream. So that will be one that when a bid comes in, we'll need to turn that relatively quickly. It's necessary for our loan application. Another piece of legislation, and this is the one that I'm going to ask you to look at to consider Monday, basically is to authorize the city to enter into a loan agreement. An example of where we've done this in the past is O-14419. So certainly you can look back at the records and I can share that, although I'm sure Clerk Walker could provide that as well. But for a previous project, that's an example of where we passed a piece of legislation so that we can go ahead and apply for this particular funding stream. And the reason we have to do that is because, you know, it's been a number of months, or actually it's been more than a year, and so we re-enter the cycle every year, and you have to reapply every year. So that's what I'm going to ask you to bring back forward Monday and pass under suspension so that we can keep this ball rolling. And then there's the fairly large piece of legislation that also I will ask you to turn quickly once bids come in. If you compare them to other projects that we've done under this funding stream, and that's to authorize the Service Safety Director to award bids, not to advertise and accept bids, because you already did that, but to award bids, to enter into contracts for construction and construction engineering, and then authorize and appropriate the funds. And I anticipate that this project will be in the $6.5 million range for construction. The scope includes the new sewer that will come across what we call the Ridges Tier 2 property, so all of the land south of Dairy Lane, all the way down to Blackburn and Stagecoach intersection, and ultimately will provide sewer service to that land, should that land ever develop, as well as bring in the county sewage. And so that's a major secondary goal or primary goal, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to provide sewer service should that land develop in the future. Number two, to bring a new sewer in Dairy Lane. Dairy Lane currently is sewered and has been for a long time with an undersized sewer that has enough capacity to serve what's there, but nothing more. And then that will allow for the portion of the county's flow that is coming in Dairy Lane, which is about 10% of the flow, to come in that way. And then also a new water line on Dairy Lane. And if you look back through records in this body, I believe a few years ago it was talked about, but I know that we've talked about it outside of council as well. The dairy barn renovated their facility, and they came to the city and requested the city build a water line to support fire protection for the dairy barn. If you look back in our history, one of the two barns at the dairy barn location prior to being in the city burned down, you know, we cannot provide fire protection right now to Dairy Lane. When council annexed and the city annexed the Ridges back in 1990, LEAX maintained water service, as they have the right to do for all the properties on Dairy Lane. And so there are 7 customers basically that LEAX has there, where we provide sewer service to them, but LEAX provides water service. And Rural Water District has the right to retain customers when a city acquires them, or correction, doesn't acquire them, annexes property, or a right to retain the opportunity to serve future customers unless the city and the Rural Water District can strike an agreement to take over those potential customers. And so that's the second part of this, which I anticipate to be in the $1 million range, you know, maybe $800,000 to build a proper water line that will also provide fire protection on Dairy Lane. And then lastly, there'll be a smaller provision as part of this project to build a sidewalk on Dairy Lane. And that's something that I know that people have been asking about in previous years, simply because of the nature of pedestrians that want to walk out to points west of the park at South Park Drive. And I anticipate that'll be less than $250,000. So that piece of legislation, when it does come forward, will have funding from sewer, water, and street all together in order to provide funding for that. And then the fifth piece of legislation, and this is something that is requested from us because we think it's good policy, it's not required to get the project across the finish line, is authority to strike an agreement between the city and the Rural Water District LEAX to take over those customers. We've done some initial math, and the revenue loss over the 30-year period that we use for calculating such things with LEAX is in the $1 million range, million to 1.2 million range is what LEAX has forecasted. And so they say basically you have to pay us that if we were going to give you these customers. The idea that I've spoken with Member McCary, you sir, and as well as the Member Reisner, who was present at the meeting, about was to actually swap customers with LEAX for several extraterritorial customers on Longview Heights Drive that currently are, and when I say extraterritorial, these are customers that the city provides water to, but do not reside in the city. So there are 5 residents, 5 or 6 on Longview Heights that are beyond the Unitarian Church on that end, that are outside the city. There is a LEAX line right there as well, but the city was there first, and so the city was the one that provided water to those customers. And our thinking is we could save on, rather than buying the Dairy Lane customers completely from LEAX, we could instead trade customers with LEAX and then just pay LEAX for the difference. And so that's the last piece of legislation that I would bring forward. It's not necessary that comes quickly, but all 5 of these pieces of legislation are related to this particular project. Hopefully that explains what we talked about last week, sir.
Thank you. That's a lot of great background information. And just for a little additional background, I am wanting to confirm that this is reflected in the Athens 2040 comprehensive plan. I'm seeing that After several delays, the county sewer corridor project was scheduled to begin in early 2021, intended to resolve some existing environmental issues from failing septic systems, and was going to connect approximately 1,300 septic users to the city's public sanitary sewer system, and provide some development opportunities for the Ridges Tier 2 area. I was wondering if you can make sure I'm correct in assuming that this is connected to those long-term plans, and if you can comment on what the development opportunities could potentially be.
Sure. So to answer your first question, yes, it's absolutely in line with those long-term plans that we said we were going to do with Athens 2040. Number two, I think this body will hear from the working group, from the Ridges Advisory Group, and then the consultants that Ohio University has hired to look at the redevelopment plans for the Ridges in November, if I'm not mistaken. So it's probably a little premature for me to say what those development plans would be, but in all instances, they'd have to have sewer. So the idea would be that this would make it more viable that could happen.
Excellent. Let's go ahead and take questions from the committee for this one. Councilmember Swank?
Assuming the council moves quickly on this, everything gets passed, groundbreaking date, completion date, how many years are we talking?
Sure. So currently we are up against a deadline on an agreement that the city entered into with the county to take the first drop of sewage on January 1st, 2023. I am very concerned about making that delegation, and so that's one of the reasons why, and a lot of this has to do with just the delays in acquiring property, frankly. The negotiations have gone on for a long time for the property owners that have to grant easement rights to cross their land. But beyond that, I don't want to I don't have any other bureaucratic's not the right word, but basically administrative reason why we're delayed, other than just the contractor takes a while to build something. So, in a perfect world, I'd have it done by January 1st. I don't know that I'm going to meet that deadline, but I'm not ready to give up yet. And so I'm every week past that deadline that we agreed to, we're in breach of our agreement with the county, and I don't want to be in breach with the county. And number two, that's also money that the county will pay to the city for treating that sewage. So it's also revenue loss from the city's perspective. So we're going to attempt to race and get this done as quickly as possible. It shouldn't be a long construction to at least get the sewer in the ground. I mean, ultimately, we're looking at probably a 3-month construction window. It's just a matter of when we can get everything lined up to get it delivered.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Member Carey. As far as the water line, will it go all the way out to Elliotsville Road or Blackburn Road, or where will it?
The water line will end at the last city customer on Dairy Lane, as it's designed right now, which is basically I think we've got either a 10 or a 12 designed. Or maybe it's just an 8. It might just be an 8. That's all that's necessary for the fire protection there. But it'll get to the 317 board, and then at that point it'll have a cap put on the end and a valve. And if we wanted to pick up and extend it because some development occurred further in the city, but further out that direction, we could do that. But for this project, our goal was to get ultimately a proper water line to provide fire protection to the existing facilities on.
So that's the 317 board, basically. Correct. That turn there. Okay,
and then
a
turn there with a bridge, a small bridge there, and that's where it'll.
Right, and the sidewalk, I'm assuming, would be on the other side of the street. Mm-hmm. And Ohio University has a couple of, all that property, I guess, is the Ridges, and there's I think one private home and then another home owned by the university. Right. How does that? They're going to be on board, I would imagine.
So we're working with the university to ensure that we've got access through there. In most cases, it's in right of way. So it's not a matter where we need any type of special permission from the university.
Old brick
There's one particular location where we believe that it's outside, but it's on university. But we think that we have a right to be there anyway because there's already a sewer there. So we don't need a special easement necessarily from the university. That easement exists somewhere in history from the Ohio Department of Mental Health timeframe. Right,
and the very old fence that runs along, do you know if that will have to be removed, or will it fit in there?
No,
It'll fit in there.
Yeah, that's a historic.
I thought so. Even this.
Yeah, feature. So
interesting as it
in all cases, it'll either be inside that or outside of it, but will not require removal.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to add a little bit, since you were asking the question is how far out Dairy Lane, that also, begs for the question, how far out Longview Heights Road as well. And it's basically from the Unitarian Church out to Siegel Lane, or near Siegel Lane, to where there would be the customer swap in that area.
And when you say Siegel Lane, that's not quite Pomeroy Road, we're talking that direction, right? Oh, the other direction.
Other direction,
Oh,
other direction.
Towards Rock River.
okay. I just assumed it was further
Yeah,
out.
I believe the last address in the city limits along Longview Heights Road is 203 Longview Heights Road, somewhere around there. And then after that, you're outside. It's odd because one side
Right.
of Longview Heights Road is in the corp limit further down Longview Heights Road than the other side.
Okay.
But anyway, just for point of clarification for anybody who might be interested.
Thank you. Director Stone, you mentioned that this is a pretty good deal on a 0% regionalization environmental protection agency loan. Did you say it was 30 or 40 years?
So the initial term that, when we initially applied, it was a 40-year term. So the most recent application that we looked at, basically for reapplying, it's a 30-year period, but that's still at zero interest. It's still, and I can do the math specific to payback, but that's what I saw most recently.
And you estimate it's around 6 million?
I think the total project cost for this particular project is around 6 million, and that includes, about 5 million for sewer, about $1,800,000 for water, and probably 200,000 for the sidewalk component of the project. That may flux some based upon the final design, which we're working through right now, but I'll have that detail when we come forward and well in advance for us coming forward on our that last ordinance that I mentioned, or that second to last ordinance that I mentioned, which is the authorizing and appropriating of funds. The thing that is unique with this particular, and why I'm going to ask for that to come quickly when the time comes, is the Ohio EPA wants the resolution of tentative award to come in after the bids come in, because they'll only loan you the amount of money based upon what's bid plus a 5% contingency. They don't do your loan based on your engineer's estimate or your design professional's estimate. They do it based upon the actual bid, which is unique to these programs, different than, say, for instance, the way that we build things under ODOT's funding.
Are we only able to use OEPA funds for such a project one at a time? Can we have more than one loan from them like
Yes.
this? Okay, great.
And actually, two items down, we're going to talk about the other one.
Excellent. All right. Councilmember Reisner, did you have a question?
Yeah, about the customers on Longview Heights, and you wanted to do the swap. Do the customers have any say in this?
No, the customers don't. You have no obligation to serve water to people outside of the city limits. We've done so in the past in areas just to expand our customer base, I suppose. I think probably that might not be the best public policy. That's just my opinion. And that, if you want city services, you ought to annex, or at least you ought to strike an agreement with the city about what the reason that you're extending city services beyond the city is for. My guess is the reason that it was extended in that area is because there was a need back in the 80s for people to get off of wells, or 70s or 60s. I'm not quite sure when that line went in, to get off of wells, and the city was close by, and they saw a chance to grab some customers, and the council at the time authorized, because the council has to authorize extraterritorial service. Council authorized it and said it was okay, but it's a great deal, right, to get city water and not have to pay property taxes, or if you happen to work from home, income taxes inside the city.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions or comments for Project 317? Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to ask this question, but I know we've had this conversation before a while ago about how there's these, old bridges, little small bridges, and I go down that road frequently. And I've wondered how in the world you could even put sidewalks next to it. So obviously you've come up with a plan for that, so you're going to have to remove some of that. There was some discussion about how we really shouldn't, or some people were upset about those ancient bridge, materials or whatever. So if you could just give me a sense of where that's going to go, exactly
So
how it's gonna work.
it may be best for us to sit down and look at specific plans for each of the 3 bridges on Dairy Lane, because there's 3.
Yeah.
Specifically, one of which is not being reached by the sidewalk, so it's beyond the 317 board. The other 2 are being passed. One of which we did a fairly significant project a few years ago where we actually widened it, and now there's space inside the railing to place the sidewalk. The other one, it'll end up being outside of it. And I'll have to show you exactly how we're going to do that on a map.
Okay, great.
But the bridges won't be removed, I guess, to answer your question.
Okay.
Great questions. Looks like we're ready to move on to our second item, West Union Street improvements. Let's talk about this access road. And we once again can hear an update from Director Stone.
Okay, this is technically a transportation project, but somehow it ended up in the City Safety and Services Committee here this evening. We had a joint meeting about a week ago, I don't know, a week and a half ago, with Member McCary and Member Reisner. I don't know if Member Reisner would want to talk about that in advance of me talking, or I can go ahead and talk.
Or we can
Well, it's
postpone it.
under his committee right now, so
Okay.
you do what he says.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and pick that up. So the bottom line is that there will be about 4 pieces of legislation that will need to come forward on this project as well. We discussed it at this joint meeting that we had last week with the Engineering Public Works staff, as well as myself. I will have to determine which of these 4 pieces of legislation needs to start next week.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that we have to accept or pass legislation to enter into an LPA agreement, which we do in all ODOT funding streams. And then we have to accept the easements, and these are all the easements that have been granted to the city for the construction of the project from various property owners along the way. We've been going through the process of buying those and acquiring those or getting them donated here over the last 3 years. And then the council ultimately has to accept them before they can be recorded. We have to appropriate and authorize money for construction, and then we also have to authorize the administration to apply for a SIB loan, which we anticipate being the mechanism by which we would get the bridge funding to make the rest of the funding on this particular project. Like I said, I don't believe, I'll be close, but I don't know that I'll be ready to start any of this legislation next week. But I think those are the 4 pieces that will come forward for this
And
project.
it sounds like for our next time that we have Project 322 come up, we'll want to move it to the Transportation Committee.
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, there is a water component of this project, and that we're replacing the water line on West Union Street as well. So it's, as President Isley is aware, so from my time as a city engineer, so often, transportation projects and services projects blend together because we're trying to do our best to build infrastructure and stuff under the road when we're doing transportation. So often people are just concerned about what's on top of the road. But your committee obviously is focused on what's underneath it, so
Absolutely.
the 2 are kind of mixed together.
Thank you. So although this will move to a different committee, do we have any questions about Project 322 and this access road?
Yeah, where's the access road?
So the access road is via Harold Avenue between Union Street and West State Street. And the last time this came forward, when we thought we were going to move forward with this project, we sought the appropriation of property on West State Street, and that failed in City Council, as everybody here is aware. We've redesigned it, gone back to the drawing board, redesigned it to the second alternative, basically, from where we had originally looked at various alignments, and this will allow the access road to go in between the current alignment of Harold Avenue and West State Street behind the city transit garage. So basically through what we call the bottom, which is a material storage area beside the wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, and the water treatment plant and bus garage.
Do we have any drawings on this?
I do.
I mean, this is a committee meeting. And this is where we're to have an informed discussion about a topic. And I don't mean to be flippant and I don't mean to be rude, but we're talking about things that we can't conceptualize.
Fortunately, this item will be on an upcoming agenda for the Transportation Committee, and I think they'll have an opportunity to look at those
So we will
details.
go to committee before we go to first reading. I think that'd be appropriate considering not one person has seen these documents.
We have seen the maps.
Where?
We saw the maps with the original design, and this is alternate.
It would have been,
So-
it would have been nice to have that included in the packet for tonight for discussion.
So noted, but I don't think that it harms.
I think it
moving forward.
prevents, I don't want to argue, President Isley, but if we're going to have a discussion on a topic, we can't simply hear about it. We have to see it.
So your proposal is to delay, rather than to start the legislation next week?
Yes. First reading is not the place to have the initial discussion of any topic.
We aren't having the initial discussion.
We
next
are
week.
because we're having
it tonight.
we're having an incomplete discussion. We do not have collateral material or documents.
I would, Mayor, Councilmember McCary, you have the mayor, and then my other query would be to the Service Safety Director on what this does to the timeline for the improvements in the project and the funding on it.
Okay, we'll hear from the mayor next. Yeah.
You know, I guess my general comment is you're not seeing any designs for the sewer on the previous piece of legislation that we were just talking about, nor where a sidewalk is going to go in. We can certainly get those designs to where you'll see them. No one's hiding the football as we're looking at these plans. Everybody has seen where the original access road was going to go in. That failed. You know, and so it is being moved approximately 200 feet in the other direction to go in down by where the Athens Public Transit Maintenance Facility is. I mean, it's not rocket science, but we can certainly get council the design so you see what the map is, because that's basically what you're asking.
Yeah.
If you want the detailed designs, you know, where the sewers are going to go, where the storm drains are going to go, you know, we can provide that as well. But basically, is what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to see what that pathway looks like. And that's fine. We can get you that pathway. There's no issue with that.
No, just a general, and that the other stuff you mentioned would be micromanagement on our part, and that is not a legislative thing. But when we sit down to have a conversation about something, and I see the word access road, I would at least like to know what the where the access road is. And yes, I agree. We did see some rough stuff back, but it'd be nice to have the complete package for the discussion. That's all I'm asking.
That's fine. Again, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. And for our Safety Services Director, regarding the potential for circulating the image with the access road before this comes up for our next meeting, does that sound feasible?
It is.
Yeah. And do you have any other concerns about delays?
I don't. I think it'll be fine. I'll provide we've given we gave comments back to the design firm on their basically their stage 3 redesign after we had to redesign, and we did some markups. So what I probably will do is provide those markups specifically, and the notes there. It's a pretty sizable document, but I'll make sure it's available.
All right. Yes, Councilmember.
One last thing. Mr. Stone, if this is going to delay things, no need to. Just a simple email with that document to everybody this week would suffice, and we could move on with the first reading.
I think that probably what you're asking about is really just the kind of an aerial of the alignment,
Yeah.
more so than like the detailed plans.
Exactly.
Exactly. So yeah, I can provide that.
Thank you very much. Yes, any other questions for this access road topic? Yes.
Okay, so Larry's Hot Dogs restaurant on that corner is a real problem now. And this came up before, but I think we have to discuss it before we take this down the road too far. It is dangerous. I mean, I go down there all the time, and people are lined up for, a block in either direction a couple of times a day sometimes. So I know you've approached them, etc., but I don't think we should have a full decision on this until there's some discussion about what we can do about the traffic there.
Director Stone, do you already have any comments or updates about safety concerns around Larry's Doghouse?
I can speak to that. We worked extensively, is probably too conservative of a word when we talk about the amount of conversation we have with both Larry, the previous owner, and the current owner. as to what is possible, given that they own out to the corner. I mean, there's no right-of-way there. So in all instances, we are acquiring right-of-way from them. And when you acquire right-of-way, it ends up being a negotiation unless you're going to just take it outright and do an eminent domain action for something that they don't want. And what we ended up landing on will make it better. It will not make the traffic go away from Larry's Doghouse. The option we have there is to buy Larry's Doghouse and pay the full market value for that. But it will be better, and I'd like to provide some, like a diagram basically of what provisions will make it better, so that it's a less dangerous situation, but it won't be perfect.
Oh, Director Stone, thank you very much. I know this has been not an easy thing, and I appreciate your work on this, and I'll look forward to seeing, what you're doing to mitigate the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments and questions on that second item. Our third item, very closely related to the first item in terms of sewer expansion projects. This is project number 330, using the same funds that we were just talking about from the Ohio EPA. So Director Stone, do you have a summary that you can provide for project 330?
I can. Thank you. So a couple years ago, as we kicked it off, and it's approaching about 3 now, the initial approach was to place the sewer that was going to accept the about 30% of the sewage from the county project, as well as replace or upgrade the couple lift stations that need to be upgraded straight up West Union Street. As the consultant worked on the design for West Union Street street project and access road project that we were just talking about, we basically got really far down the path in design, and they came back to the city here last year and said, showed us the design, and we looked at it, and it's just not a tenable approach. They were working under guidance from the previous engineer, and it just wasn't a tenable approach. And so Solly, the current city engineer, looked at it and said we can't do this. This is just not going to be viable. So we proposed a realignment for that, which will take the sewer down basically the bike path. And be a force main rather than be a gravity line in West Union Street, and will bypass the depot lift station, which is one of the key things that is necessary for that sewage, because we don't want to upgrade the depot lift station again. So in order to redesign this approach, we're looking at about $250,000. That's the estimate we have from the firm, and so we're asking for an increase in the expenditure for design services by $250,000 against this project.
Thank you very much. And for the mention that this will run alongside the bike path, it's my understanding that this will not be anything that would be visually disruptive or even visible at all.
It'll be on the ground. Any damage to the bike path will be repaired with repavement. Will not damage the cherry trees, I promise. That's critical. But that's the approach here.
Thank you. We are ready for questions and comments about Project 330 here. Any from the committee members? Yes.
I'll just say that the protector of the cherry trees, Susan Calhoun, has just retired, and there is nobody yet in her position. And there will be many voices that will hope that we do what we can here. Not do what we can, that we preserve everything possible. Let me know if you need connections.
Remember, Kyle, I will take on the mantle of said protector.
Well, good luck replacing Susan Calhoun.
Or at least insofar as this project goes, given the amount of effort we've put into doing plantings, and this body has put into doing plantings with the Richland Avenue Roundabout and other projects we've done to expand on the cherry blossoms that we have in the spring. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and we'll make sure it's
Thank you.
The director indicated earlier today that he would indeed be the Lorax of the cherry trees. So.
Great.
Director Stone, is this another one where it would be easy to show just an overview, an aerial of where the line would go? alongside the bike path?
Yeah, I could do that. For that, it's important to note that this project is not just a sewer line. This includes upgrades of both what we call the bedrock lift station, which is no longer bedrock, but it's in front of bedrock, as well as the lift station on Richland Avenue by the roundabout. So this is a bigger project than just a sewer line, but the alignment of that particular portion of it, I can share that.
Thank you. Other interests or questions from committee members? Other council members? Let's see, administration? Audience? All right. So that will conclude our third City and Safety Services Committee meeting item for this evening. That concludes our meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember McCary. We'll move on to Planning and Development, chaired by Councilmember Grace, joined by Councilmembers Crowell, McCary, and Spielness.
Thank you, President Isley. And we're going to continue on topic of sewer systems and easements. And in this particular case, the university, via the Ohio Department of Administrative Services, is seeking the written approval from the city for a sewer easement going around Clippinger on the university campus. And we do have a very long document and a legal description of the easement, as well as an aerial photo with a general location highlighted. And I believe this is something that has been going on for some time, and perhaps the state has just gotten paperwork to us for an easement that they would like for us to legally sign onto and grant to them. Do you have other information, Director Stone?
Right. Thank you, Member Grace. This is actually something initiated when I was the city engineer and director of public works, and not the service safety director. So just to give you an idea of how the speed of the Department of Administrative Services. In this particular instance, this is an easement that the university is granting to the city, that the city has to accept, not the other way
Not
around.
this way.
So it's not the
Sorry.
city granting land rights, it's the university granting land rights. When the new chemistry building was built, they built it on top of the footprint of the existing main trunk line for the city sewer that carries, the majority of the city sewage. And so there had to be a redesign and a rerouting of that trunk line around the new chemistry building. And as part of the construction, Ohio University designed and paid for construction of this new line, and also granted the city an easement. And now we're finally getting around to the Department of Administrative Services having the documentation pulled together to give to the city council to accept the easement that the university is granting.
Okay. Yeah, it said approval of the grantee, and yeah, but obviously it is infrastructure that has been in place for many years already.
Well before COVID.
Yes, and we now have the paperwork to make it official. Are there any questions about this? Yes.
No
Member
question,
Crowell.
just a comment pursuant to the timing of this. The OU entity, the Ohio University entity listed on the document is Don Brook, which is correct. However, his address is listed as 160 West State Street, which, depending on how long you've been around, is McBee Building, HDL, WUSOC, and now The Rock under construction. So if anything gets sent to him there, he won't get it.
I love it.
Are there any other comments or questions? Then that concludes this committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. Short and sweet. Thank you, Councilmember Grace. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel. Councilmember Swank Crowell as Chair of Finance, and Councilmembers Reisner, Ziff, and Spielness.
Thank you, President Isley. We have 4 items, all appropriations on the Finance and Personnel Committee agenda. The first one is a $2,170 litter grant the city received from the Ohio EPA Recycling and Litter Prevention Fund. The city applied for this grant to install security cameras to monitor illegal dump sites. So this money will go to the garbage, solid waste, to garbage, and this will be solid waste officers in the code department that will be installing and monitoring these cameras. Any questions about this grant received? From the committee, other members of council, administration? Okay, next item is it's time to pay our sewer debt fund payment, and the auditor has recommended a $20,000 payment, Fund 758 TC 400. Any questions from the committee about paying our bills? Other members of council, administration, audience, okay. And the third item on our agenda is an appropriation of $21,700, and this is for an Ohio History Connection grant, and this is a grant where the city spends the money and then is reimbursed. This grant is for more sites like the Berry Hotel, the virtual history display, if you've been down and tried that, with a cell phone, it's quite interesting. And we'd like to have more of that in the city. Are there any questions from the committee on this grant? Other members of council? Yes, Mr. Swank.
Do we have any ideas of what the next virtual history sites might be?
That's a great question. I do not. Does the administration have any information?
We do. Armory would be among them, but there's other sites as well. Mount Zion.
Oh.
The next one will be Mount Zion. There's 4 with this grant. I know Mount Zion is the first one. I'll get the specifics of the other 3.
Is the ultimate goal then, however many we end up with, to actually have an Athens virtual history walking tour?
That's great.
We would.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the plan for any of you who know Dr. Nancy Stevens. She has done some really amazing work up at the ridges with self-guided tours. This would be similar to that. It could be known as the place of virtual tour.
Yeah, very good.
But you do have to be there.
Spend your money. Pay your taxes.
Other questions? Okay, and the last item on our agenda tonight is, we've talked about this quite a bit over the past probably year. This is $7,500 appropriated to the general fund city council, and this is to pay for our updated code of ordinances. We did have 468 pages of general neutral changes, and at $11.50 a page. That is a total of $5,382, but the company is offering a $3,000 flat rate for general neutral changes. So $3,000 will be for those changes. $3,500 will be for general ordinances. We have 128 pages of these. We have 7 images that are priced separately, and 9 different OrdLink postings. And then you receive hard copies. So the total of all of this is $6,500, and then an additional $1,000, which would be to link to the website. So a total of $7,500 to the general fund city council. Are there any questions from the committee about updating our code of ordinances? Other members of council? Yes, Mr. Swank.
So question number 1, we've already done this.
The updates, but not through the, I don't,
No.
no, the answer is no. I don't, we've made the
You're waiting
updates.
for approval to go forward with publishing.
So, but
But the
somebody.
work has been done
But yes, I mean,
Yes,
the work has been
done, sorry.
Work has been done.
by the city.
Oh, the city did it? Oh, we did it ourselves, okay. So basically,
Mr.
that's,
McCary and his students
And
did most of
Councilman-
it.
no, basically a search and replace.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Member
Yeah,
McCary.
I'm pleased to hear about the flat rate of $3,000. Did you come to understand that as an incentive for cities to do this?
It certainly seems like one to me, doesn't it?
Hear that, other cities?
I don't know how that came about, but I was pleased when I read that in the contract or whatever that they sent. Other questions or statements? Administration?
I know that Councilmember McCary spoke to this and spoke to the team of individuals at the university who worked on this. And I just want to give recognition to them as well as to you for all the work put into making this happen. And yeah, if this does become an incentive for other municipalities to look at gender neutrality in their language, then yay. But again, want to recognize Councilmember McCary for championing this through.
And I'll just say that as we all learn, that I was in I'm on a new board, and I was in my first executive board meeting, and I was given the bylaws, and I said, oh, are we editing these? Because there's a lot of he and him and his in here. So hopefully we'll get the world corrected here eventually. Any other comments? That completes Finance and Personnel, President Nysley.
Thank you, Councilmember Crowell. And we are adjourned at 8:41 PM. Thank you all.